When teams work in physical co-located spaces, oftentimes they mount wall surfaces which serve as their task boards, and then they create the visual flow of work on those surfaces. They begin with the first column called to do, which is often the product backlog. Then they have work in progress, which is the second column, and then they have done, which is the third column. And then they stick pieces of paper in these columns to represent the work pieces they would be executing. And then as they execute the work to create the deliverables, they move these tiny pieces of paper through the various stages to show the progress of the work. But what about teams that are geographically dispersed, virtual team members? How do they benefit from the visual flow of work, from what we call information radiators, which shows the progress of the work? That is where electronic boards come in. And as a matter of fact, electronic boards are not only recommended for virtual teams, even for physically co-located team members, it's important for them to adopt electronic board system because of current hybrid models at the workplace. Because these days, people do not only work in the physical office, sometimes they work in other locations, other times they even take work home and then work at different hours of the day. Okay, so having electronic boards that exist online so that team members, wherever they are, can collaborate together and work together is very important. Now, in this video, we are going to look at how to work with electronic boards, okay, with a particular tool I love so much called Trello. Now, these software are online, okay. These electronic board systems are usually online, and team members, wherever they are, can still follow the work, follow the progress of the work. Now, these tools have several names. They can be called collaboration tools, they can be called task boards, or information radiators, okay, or Kanban boards, okay. Yes, you can call them all of these names. Scrum calls theirs Scrum boards, okay, illustrating the visual flow of work. So we are going to look at how Trello works out, and you can work with Trello. You can go and create a free account and experiment with it to see how the work flows. Is very, very important.
Simplicity, it's called Trello. So we are going to use Trello. Is a visual management tool. It's a Kanban board. You can create your workflow in Trello. So we are going to create our workflow. Now you see there are a lot of boards on my home screen here showing the kind of projects I've been engaged on and projects I'm still engaged on. Some of these projects are not projects I lead, but they are projects being done elsewhere to which I may be invited to, so I could consult or something like that. So that is why they are here. So I get to see everything that is going on wherever they are happening. Now, these boards are meant to cause the team to collaborate and work together wherever they may be. In a traditional co-located environment where all the team members are in one space, typically they use wall surfaces to create their workflow. So you see to do, in, doing, and done. And then they stick the work elements on pieces of paper. Okay, and then as they complete each deliverable, they move it through the various stages. But if you are working with virtual team members who are geographically dispersed, then you may need to use an electronic board that exists on a website so that wherever they are, they can still see and be part of the work, collaborating in real time. As a matter of fact, even for physically co-located members, it's encouraged for them to use electronic board, because this day of hybrid systems, work models, people don't only work in the work environment, they still continue to work at home and in other places. So let's create a board, but we need to name a project. So I'm looking at a project like a ride-hailing service, like the Uber, like Bolt, okay, the likes of these services, okay. So we also want to come out with our own service for the purposes of this illustration. So let's call our own, let me create it here. So we will call it, let's call it motion. Yes, let's call it motion, and then let's create it. So motion has been created, and this is the work area of motion. You can even change the background if you don't like it. You can change it here. So as you can see, I have just changed the background. Now, the generic naming of the columns of most Agile workflow is to do. Okay, so to do has to do with all the work elements that we will plan to do. And then we have in progress, has to do with works that are currently being developed. And then we have done, which has to do with works that have been completed. This is the generic listing or columns for most Agile projects. But depending on the peculiar nature of your project and how you work, you can modify that. So let me even show you some boards I have worked on before. Let's even pick this. Okay, so this is, as you can see, it goes beyond the generic naming or nomenclature. We have a lot of other lists here. We have a couple of them, even intense list of activities, a couple of them, plenty. Okay, and when you pick each work element, you see a lot of things that have been planned out to be completed. You see all of these stuffs. You see, there are things that have been planned out and all of that. So that's it. So let's get back to our motion. So this motion, and then let's see how the work can be planned out with motion. So we have to do, we have in progress, and then we have done. But let's see if we can modify even this list a little. So for us to do, we can even the in progress, we can put a sprint there because we want to organize our work by sprints. So we can say sprint X in progress. When we get there, we decide which sprint that is. So sprint X in progress. This to do is our product backlog. We can actually name it the product backlog. And that's where all the works will be arranged, prioritized, planned out. You get it. And then we can add, before done, we can add a listing. We can call this testing. Okay, because we want to test the deliverables before we move it to done. Okay, as you can see, these things are very fluid. You can actually move them about. So we have testing here. So after the sprint is completed, we move it to testing so that the testers can test whether they meet the done criteria before we move them to done. Okay, yeah. So this is the product or iteration backlog, and that is where we'll create our story cards. Okay. Now, when you look at the process or the flow of Agile project management, we can develop epics, okay, at the product backlog. Remember, epics are large user stories. Those are epics, large user stories. The rule of a user story is that it must be completed within a maximum of 3 days. So if a user story is bigger than that, then that is not a user story. We can actually call that an epic, okay? So let's see if we can put down some epics or large user stories for the project that we are doing. So we have Motion, which is a ride-hailing service. I believe that by the time we are done, most of you would prefer to use Motion if we actually realize that deliverable beyond just the academic work. Yeah, so we have onboarding. So onboarding, which is a component or a large user story. For the purposes of keeping our works organized, I like to usually assign a letter code to the components. So we have onboarding, we can have user sign up and verification. Let's call that B. we can have the next work item, user profile. User profile, let's call that C. We can have request. So when you are requesting for a ride, okay, we can call it a ride request so that we don't confuse. Let's call that D. And then we can have another epic we can call trip history. Let's call that E. Then we can have payments. Let's call that F. We can have help. Let's call that G. We can have user account settings. Let's call that H. Okay, so maybe we can even add another one, administrative backend, which is for the technical guys. Let's call that I. Now these are epics, okay, but epics are large user stories, so you can even bring their user story definitions. So for instance, let's just do about 2 of them. So let's pick onboarding. When you click on onboarding, you come to this space and you can put the user story description there. So user stories, like I told you, user stories are features or functions that are described from the end user's perspective. Okay, I think in the next video or so, I'm going to give you details concerning some notable agile terminologies, and user stories is actually part of that. But here, user stories are like features or functions that are described from the end user's perspective, and it usually has 3 parts, okay? So the first part is the persona, the one performing the action, okay? So you can say as a new prospective user. I think when we say onboarding, you know what onboarding is. Onboarding is has to do with all the communications that demonstrate the value of the application so that people decide whether they would download or they would sign up for the service. That is what we call onboarding. Is the communication or the learning stage or the area where you tell people the value you are offering. Okay, so as a new prospective user, I need to be informed on the value this app offers so I can make a decision to download or create an account. So like I told you, it has 3 parts. User stories have 3 parts. The persona, the one performing the action, and then the action the person or the person is performing or what the person is looking for, okay? And that is what the team members will create. And then the reason, the benefit it offers to the user becomes the 3rd part, okay? So we have given a description, a user story description to that component. We can also do a user story description for, so you see these lines here, this symbol here showing that there is a user story description for that component. Let's pick ride request, and then let's see if we can do a user story on ride request. We can do something like this. As a logged in user, I need to be able to request for a car anytime I need to move to enable me get to my destination without hassle. Let's add that. So we've given what? A user story description to the component called ride request D, all right? So this is basically the thing about the product backlog. Okay. Now, there is what we call backlog prioritization, which is usually performed by the product owner. Okay. And what the product owner does with backlog prioritization is to arrange the work in terms of priority. Okay. So if you maybe the product owner thinks that the right request should be developed first, can bring it up here. Okay, maybe onboarding is maybe one of the last things that will be done when we are actually ready to launch. So bring it down. Okay, maybe user profile will come, maybe payments. Okay, maybe payments will also come, and then maybe trip history. Maybe after right request, we should tackle trip history, depending on what they think should be delivered or what the client wants to see first. Okay, and that is basically about backlog priority. You keep moving it, and after every sprint release, we keep doing backlog reprioritization. That's what we can also call backlog refinement or backlog grooming. Okay, just to ensure that all that is in the product backlog are relevant and any useless user story is eliminated and new user stories can actually be added. Okay, and then we can even reprioritize. If the priorities of the customer have changed, we can also reprioritize. And then the final thing we do in initiation is to determine our release planning, is to conduct release planning. How long will we be releasing? What will be the duration of our sprints? Now, it's important that the team keeps a steady pace. Okay, that is why we do these time box elements, especially in Scrum, so that the team can keep a steady pace. So maybe for our rules, our sprint will be for 2 weeks. Let's agree that our sprint will be for 2 weeks. So each moment, the team will be working within 2 weeks sprint in order to deliver the objectives of that sprint. Once this is done, our project has been initiated. Then we move to the planning stage where we create user stories, okay? Out of our epics, we create user stories. So for instance, we pick this right request and then we create user stories out of the right request, okay? So we can create them here actually, okay? But since we want a smooth flow of work, we can create an ad hoc list. We can call it right request D and then move it here. Okay, so we want to develop or create user stories for that particular epic, right? Request D. Okay, so please let's go through it. Let's take the pains to go through it. So maybe we can create a first user story D1 and we can call that automated live location. We can call D2 destination selection. We can call D3 drivers information. We can call D4 trip duration. We can call D5 pickup arrival time. We can call D6 cost. We can call D7 cancel request. We can call D8 track pick up time. We can call D9 pick up arrival notification. Okay. And then maybe these are the user stories that have to be accomplished for the right request epic to be fully delivered. Okay. Now you need to add the user story description to each one of them. So please, let's take the pains and do that so you see how it works out. So maybe for the automated live location, we can write something like this: as a logged in user, I need to see my live location selected anytime I intend to request for a ride. So the driver can pick me up at my convenience. So this is a user story having 3 portions. So as a logged in user, that becomes the persona, the one performing the action, and then the expected feature to be delivered is in the middle, and then the objective that user story satisfies is the third element of a user story. Okay, so we've done it for the automated live location. Okay, so we can do for destination selection. As a logged in user, I need to select any location I am visiting so the driver can transport me there. Good user story description for that component. We go to driver's information. We can say this: as a logged in user, I need to see relevant information about who is picking me up to ensure easy identification and security. Good user story. Then we pick the trip duration. As a logged in user, I need to know how long the entire trip will take, so I know when I could possibly get there. Great. Then we come to pick up arrival time. Pick up arrival time. So as a logged in user, I need to know how long it will take for the cab to get to my pick up location, so I know how long I will have to wait. I think that's a good user story for this component. I think so. Then we go to D6. As a logged in user, I need to know how much it will cost for my trip to determine my willingness and ability to pay. A very good user story. Then we go to cancel request. As a logged in user, I should be able to cancel the request if I am not pleased with anything about the offer, or I change my mind about the trip. Good user story. Track pickup time. As a log user, I should be able to track the time progress of the cab in relation to my pick up point, so I know how long I will have to keep waiting. Then we have the final one. We have, as a logged in user, I need this for pickup arrival notification. I need to be informed about my driver's arrival so I can connect with him or her. So we've done all the user stories for that particular selections, okay? Aha. So everybody knows what we are doing. Okay, so yeah, so we have all the user stories that have been described here. Okay. Then we estimate the user stories in terms of how long they will take, the level of effort required, and stuff like that. After estimating for them, we can now commit to the user stories. Sometimes you can estimate and then maybe add their duration. Maybe this one will take 2 days. Okay. This one will also take maybe 3 days. Okay. Or whatever it is, you can add the days. As a matter of fact, when you click on this, later you can even attach dates to it. You can say, let's complete by so and so period, and then the dates will be attached to it. All right. That is how it works. So we have all the durations attached to them. Okay. And then the next thing we do is to commit to user stories. We commit user stories to sprints. So let's say that we are now about to undertake our first sprint, sprint 1. Okay. So you have sprint 1 here, sprint 1 in progress, and then you decide, okay, that how many user stories are you going to commit to sprint 1? You leave this one, you add it, D2. Now, as you are adding the user stories to the sprint, you are also checking for how long it takes, okay? Remember, we are working within 10 days, 2 weeks sprint. So we are working within 10 days. So right now we have 5 days, okay? We add this to it, we add that to it, and we check how many days do we have more, just to ensure that we are within our 2 weeks period. All right, very, very important. So let's assume that these 4 user stories can be completed in 2 weeks, then we leave it here. Okay, we leave it here, and then we are good to go. And that becomes sprint 1 in progress. Now, if you work with Kanban, Kanban doesn't work with time boxes. Kanban is feature driven. So what Kanban does is that for their work in progress, they determine a limit of the features that can be there. Okay, yeah, since they are not working with time-boxed sprints, they work with limits to work in progress. So take note of that. So now we have sprint 1 in progress. So this is what the team members, the developers will pick and start working on. Okay, yes, they will pick it and start working on. But usually when they pick a particular component like automated live location, 2 days, it's been estimated for 2 days, and they know what they are expected to complete, what the end user is expecting. As a logged in user, I need to see my live location selected anytime I intend to request for a ride, so the driver can pick me up at my convenience. Then they estimate for the task that have to be performed. So they would have their task, and then they can now add tasks they need to do in order to perform this action. Okay, so you select a number of tasks, okay, and then you add them like that, and then you keep doing it. Some of them will take 2 hours, others will take 3 hours, but in all, the objective is to complete all the tasks within 2 days. Okay, and then whilst they are estimating for these tasks and they have been completed, they start executing the task. They start executing the task. And whilst executing is ongoing, they perform the standard meetings. Remember the daily standard meetings? Yes. Just so that everything is going according to plan. Remember the 3 questions that I asked during standard meetings. What were you able to accomplish yesterday? What do you intend accomplishing today? What obstacles lie in your way? Those 3 questions. They conduct the daily stand-up to ensure that things are going according to plan. Remember, the Scrum Master leads these daily stand-up meetings, all right? And then from time to time, we perform backlog refinement. We keep refining the backlog. So as you see sprint 1 in progress right now, this is a sprint backlog. This is a product backlog. Even for the remaining items here, we can decide to reprioritize them. Okay, we can decide to reprioritize, groom them, remove anything we think is irrelevant. And then even for the product backlog too, we can decide to reprioritize them according to which priorities have changed. Okay, if there are any irrelevant epics or user stories there, we take them off. And then we can also update them. We can also include them include new user stories or include new sprints that we have discovered. Okay. And then once the team is done with the work here, they pull it. Okay, so as we say about Kanban boards, they use the pull approach. So they keep pulling works like that. This is what we call pulling. So it means that these items have been completed, and then they've been sent to the testing stage for them to be tested against the done criteria. Okay. And then we can now plan for sprint 2. Sprint 2 in progress, and then we commit user stories to sprint 2. Okay, you see how it works. That is how it works. Once we meet the 2 weeks threshold, we stop there. Okay. Now let's talk about the testing. So this is where we test to ensure that whatever we decided to do, we set off to do. Remember the user stories have been described here. So that is what the testers will compare against and ensure that the acceptance criteria has been met. Once a sprint is completed, the team here must also perform what we call retrospective, even before they start a new sprint, so that they can perform a historical review of performance, how things went within the 2-week sprint. Is there anything they can do in order to improve on their processes before they begin a new sprint? So remember that sprint retrospectives are performed the moment sprints are completed, all right? And then eventually when the testings are conducted and they meet the criteria, they are moved to done. Okay, it means that they have been completed and then they are done. And these are the deliverables that are shipped to the client when we have to release to the client as feature increment. I believe that you follow through. You can go on Trello and create a free account and start experimenting on how to use Trello.
Remember, we are still training for your PMP project management certification. Join us for in-person classes in Ghana. Wherever you are in the world, in Africa, Europe, America, you can also join our online sessions. Remember, we have a very strong and effective post-training system to get you to the finish line. Also get in touch if you want to pursue the Professional Scrum Master certification, the Certified Scrum Master, or the Agile Certified Practitioner. Together, we will write that victory song. Thank you very much and see you in the next lesson.